All right, folks, just driving along here. So I mentioned something, I don't know, it was in a video within the last few weeks. I think I used the phrase value structures. And I think this is a important concept and actually could be a watch lexicon term. It's an important concept, though, when developing one's own palate. So if we just take a step back for a second and understand that the Johnny Casual channel is not a traditional luxury goods channel, nor am I, or have I ever claimed to be, an expert on horology or luxury watches or even watches in general. But what I'm trying to bring here is something that I felt and still feel is lacking. Now, a lot of my quote-unquote peers or colleagues, meaning other YouTubers, have, if not the same, similar or aligned philosophies, which relate to buying and wearing what you really want to wear, rather than either what you think is going to impress the corporate board meeting or what the boys club, the watch snob boys club approves of. That it's not, working your way up the quote-unquote ladder is kind of a little bit of a fool's errand, in my opinion. And that what I'm trying to do is create a platform and to encourage this idea of developing your own personal tastes. Now, it may be that by doing that, I'll alienate some people, and that's fine. It's not, this isn't a channel. If you are, there's probably very few of my viewers that are solely sort of in the Rolex to Batik mold. There are a couple, but probably those guys that watch my channel aren't the watch snob types. Like I can think of, for example, Locutus de Borg and Purple Haze 5995. Both of those guys, hey guys, are friendly, open-minded, would never say you shouldn't buy a watch that isn't approved of by RG Luxury or the Watch Snob, but that you should wear. My guess is they would both agree with me that people should wear and enjoy what they enjoy, and that's the bottom line. Now they, like Purple Haze has, I think, only Rolexes and wants to get a Patek. And he just prefers that, and it fits his lifestyle. Sounds, I don't know what you do for work, but it sounds like it's a more corporate business-oriented job. So it fits that context, right? It would be ludicrous for me to wear a Patek Philippe. I work at a private high school that's a little more counterculture-y. First of all, Patek would be like a year's salary, at least like a Nautilus. But, even if, my hope is 10 years from now, I have a thriving private counseling practice and have a couple books published, a couple novels. That would be my hope. But that's still not going to be a Patek Philippe lifestyle. And even if I did get to that point, that's not who I am. And that's the bottom line. That's what I'm trying to get at. That it's about, that we should really get the watches that are who we are, not kind of who we think we should be. Now, or who other people think we should be. Now, if you aspire to something that's different, if you aspire to be that guy, then yeah, why not? Why not work that way? I don't aspire to be that guy. And Locutus, in a different way, he has his two Rolexes, which are two really nice Rolexes, and he enjoys it. He enjoys them, if I may speak for you, Locutus, for the craftsmanship, for the horology of the watches. I've never gotten the sense that he could give two shits what other people think or how they're sanctioned by the international watch community. So, but getting back to what I was talking about, the value structure. The reason I brought this up is that in my earlier email exchange with Jeffrey McMahon, I commented to him that, in his reviews, which I really like, as with all of his videos, he doesn't mention movement, and he doesn't mention brand in any way. He doesn't mention heritage or prestige or anything like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just interesting because almost everyone who does reviews or has a rating system will at least include movement and will probably include brand. TGV does brand prestige, and also he has movement, and then he has other things like reliability, which are related to that. Jeff's, all of his categories were about the physical, visible, tactile watch. Now, like Jeff, I'm much more focused on those elements too. And I think, as Jeff pointed out, and as we discussed, a lot of that has to do with the quote-unquote tier. That if you're talking about tier 2 and 3 watches, it's not really about brand prestige or heritage. There might be some heritage involved, but the prestige, the status, what the name means, doesn't carry the same weight as when you get to tier 4 and up, especially tier 5 and up. The quote-unquote luxury component, the brand status. But Jeffrey, like myself, also doesn't care about those things, at least that aspect of it. I do care to some degree about the heritage, which, when I mean by heritage, it's not the same thing as prestige. Prestige is it has to do with what that watch means as a status symbol, where it fits in the luxury hierarchy, in the class structure. That is the one aspect of watch collecting that I actually find abhorrent. I just find it's of no interest to me, for one thing. I would never lord over somebody else. And if you're gonna say, I'm already predicting some responses from certain personality types that, well, that's just because you only have dog shit, or Breitlings and Omegas don't count. But they still count relative to, say, Seikos or Citizens and Invictas and all that. And I would never lord over them and say, well, your watches are dog shit because they aren't Swiss. Now, I might pick on Invicta a little bit because they're kind of their own special category. And I might talk about the visible, sensory qualities that are different in, say, this versus like the Seikos or Orients that I've owned, or the Citizens, but not in terms of the brand prestige. Like, to me, that's an element that's just, it's garbage, to be honest. But the heritage is something different. Heritage is almost like when you buy a watch, you're joining a club. And there's the prestige part of it, but the heritage is almost more of a subtle element of the brand name. A brand like Seiko has tremendous heritage, but they don't have the same prestige. Now, the Grand Seikos do in Asia, and a little bit here among watch aficionados, but they don't in the corporate world or in the business world or the watch enthusiast world. Anyone who's watching this video probably knows about Grand Seikos and has respect for them. Even people that are sort of Swiss snobs can say, "Oh yeah, well, Grand Seiko, they're pretty good watches." But I have heard people say, "Well, I would never spend thousands of dollars on a Japanese watch," and that, I think, has more to do with prestige. And that's the thing that I find myself even falling into that a little bit. Oh, but if I'm going to spend $3,000, why would I get a Seiko when I could get an Omega? That, to me, is something that I find it's kind of silly if you think about it, because in a way, because the name Seiko doesn't have the Swiss cachet, you might be getting a better watch for $3,000 from Seiko than you could get from any Swiss brand, right? You can't get a Rolex for $3,000 unless you're getting a beat-up Oyster Perpetual, right? That's highly used and maybe old. So this idea of value structure, what I mean by that is that in developing your own palette, and again, I want to be clear that when I say your palette, I don't mean in developing your taste along this objective line that naturally you'll go from Seikos and Citizens to Omegas, and then from there you'll go to Rolex, and there you go to Patek, right? Because in that traditional, more orthodox view, it all goes to Rolex, and then it all goes to Patek, and maybe some of the other horology brands. But it's almost like a funnel, and it all funnels into, and once you get to that funnel part where the funnel, this is all the watches up to Rolex, and then you get to that point, and you get there, you've arrived, you made it to Rolex, and then you go straight down, and the only way to go is more Rolexes, Patek, maybe Vacheron or Audemars Piguet, or probably not Breguet, you know those sorts of things. And that's not my approach. That's not what I buy into. That's sort of like the orthodox watch snob value structure, and because it's really focused on the most important factor is the prestige, is the brand name. Probably the second most important factor would be the movement, whether it's in-house, the craftsmanship that goes into the movement, and then less important are the aesthetics and the build quality and the more tangible elements of it. And they don't even talk about the X factor or the personal resonance, how much you resonate with that watch as an individual, which to me might be the most important factor of all. So a value structure would be looking at all the different factors of watches. Now TGV has 10 categories that he reviews with. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but it's things like value, durability, versatility, design, style, movement, brand prestige. There's a few others. It's stuff like that. Now, and what the approach I'm advocating is that you take those qualities, his is pretty comprehensive. There's a couple things that I would add, like I think personal resonance, individual resonance, to what degree you subjectively connect with a watch and like it. And another one I would add would be something along the lines of wrist presence, because there's how a watch looks on your wrist from your perspective, which is the aesthetics, and then there's how it looks from a distance. And you can get a sense, just look in the mirror and go like this versus going like this. It looks different. Some watches, I found that my Omega Seamaster Electric Blue, it looks really great on my wrist, but from a distance, it's like beautiful. It's just a gorgeous, it glints in the light, and the blue really shines. So it's a different thing, how it looks from a distance on your wrist versus on your wrist like this, or how it feels in your hand. So there's all these little subtle differences. So you could arrange, I mean, like if I was going to be really nerdy about this, I would take cue cards, index cards, and write all the different categories, possible categories I can think of, and then I'd arrange them in piles of like least important, somewhat important, and most important. And then I'd make a pyramid of some kind, and I'd say like, well, the most important ones, they're worth 10 points, the somewhat important are 5 points, and the least important are like 2 points or 3 points or something like that. And then you have more of a sense of hierarchy that's based upon you and your own particular view, and it also might change over time, right? So some things might become more or less important over time. I could be 10 years from now, I could be singing I could be all about the movement. I could be like movement guy. You know, and it all changes. Or I could totally become Mr. Corporate, I'm making it big in the world and I need the prestige and the status is all that matters. I highly doubt it. I just don't see that for me. I don't I don't really have that in me too much. But you see what I mean? It can change over time. We're not static. Now some people fall into what I call the prison of expertise, where they learn and learn and learn, and then they get kind of locked into their own expertise. I can think of at least one example of that. But he's not the only one. There are other people that get locked into that, and you become jaded, you know, and you lose the sense of newness. All right, folks, just driving along here. So I mentioned something, I don't know, it was in a video within the last few weeks, I think I used the phrase value structures. And I think this is a important concept and actually still feel is lacking. Now, a lot of my quote-unquote peers or colleagues, meaning other YouTubers, have, if not the same, similar or aligned philosophies, which relate to buying and wearing what you really want to wear, rather than either what you think is going to impress the corporate board meeting, or what the boys club, the watch snob boys club approves of. Actually could be a watch lexicon term. It's an important concept though when developing one's own palette. So if we just take a step back for a second and understand that the Johnny Casual channel is not a traditional luxury goods channel, nor am I, or have I ever claimed to be, an expert on horology or luxury watches, or even watches in general. But what I'm trying to bring here is something that I felt